Rachel, are you ready? Are we ready? Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Planning Committee, the first Planning Committee back in the Town Hall after all these months, and it's lovely to see everybody's faces. Even if we can't get up close, at least we can see each other now, not on a computer screen, which for some of us it might be a blessing, for others it might not be, but anyway, we'll wait and see how we get on. But welcome everybody, it's really lovely to see you all. Right, good afternoon. Oh, I've already said all that in a different way. I can't read with these glasses. May I take this opportunity to remind you of some of the domestic arrangements. It is important that all participants conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. Please put your mobile phone on silent. To speak, you must use the microphone to be heard on the live stream. Please do not interrupt other speakers. In line with the current COVID guidelines, everyone is reminded to adhere to social distancing and to wear a face mask when moving around the room in the building, unless medically exempt. Face masks may be removed when you are seated if you wish. To vote on matters, I will confirm the recommendation and request a mover and seconder. The Democratic Service Officer will confirm if the application has been granted following a show of hands. Roll calls will not be undertaken now we are back in the same room, unless, of course, a name vote is moved and recorded. I'm not going to read all the rest of that because we have got nobody to speak at the committee today, so I will move on to the normal agenda. Apologies for absence attendance of substitute members. Hello, yes?
Hi, Councillor Hall unfortunately can't be here today, so I'd like to send his apologies.
Right, okay.
Councillor McClure substituting for Councillor Hall.
Right, okay, thanks very much.
Mark Burley is absent, can't make it today.
Right, okay, thanks Eric. Thank you all. And we've got Councillor Burns for Councillor Mooney. Any urgent items? I haven't received any. Any received notice from members who may wish to move any delegated matter non-delegated? I haven't received any. Admission of public and press, everything's in part 1. Declarations of interest. Any members got any declarations of interest to declare?
Chair, just the county council matters.
Okay, thank you. I assume that goes for you as well, Councillor Burns? Yeah.
And me.
And you, Derek, yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, confirm the minutes. Do you agree I confirm the minutes and sign them of the meeting held on the 13th of April?
Agreed.
On Zoom. Thank you. Public participation, we haven't got any today. To note the terms of reference. See, that's a new one for me. Have we got to do that every time? Terms of reference. Note the terms of reference for the Planning Committee. The delegated approvals booklet for information. Do you agree to note that? Right, so we'll go on to the planning applications and we might as well start with the first one, which is Lotts Road, Askham. Who's doing this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is an application to build 23 dwellings on an allocated site in the council's local plan. And if you approach Askham from the south, and that's the way that avoids the level crossing, as you approach the Askham Village School on the right, it's the field on the left. And the field has traditionally been used for agriculture, as has the field to the south. But both fields are allocated for housing. And in fact, planning permission has already been granted for 29 houses on the adjacent field, and work has actually started already there. The scheme before us follows on many of the features from the approved scheme. They both have the dwellings facing to look onto Lotts Road. They both include sustainable urban drainage, include green infrastructure, have a mix of house types, including affordable units, and includes a net gain in biodiversity. Members will have noted from the report that there are 11 objections to the scheme, And the common theme with these objections is concerns about the standard of Lotts Road and whether Lotts Road is adequate to serve more development. And it's the section of Lotts Road back towards the A595, which is the section that concern is raised. You'll see from the recommendation, it does include a requirement for financial contributions, and these include improvements to cycle facilities and a traffic calming scheme from Lotts Road. But it's not the standard of improvement that is called for in the objections, I'm afraid. But I do explain in the report in some detail why we can't require contributions to a much more extensive scheme. Well, the recommendation is for approval on completion of a 106 obligation to require the financial contributions, to require the affordable units, and also to ensure that there's adequate management arrangements for open areas and so forth in the future. So, Chair, as I mentioned, the recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you, Charles. It's going to be strange, this. Instead of saying you're on mute or turn yourself off mute, I'm saying make sure you put your mic on when you speak, please, if anybody's got any questions. Anybody got any questions? Daniel?
Want to I know you've covered quite a few of the issues, but I want to express my concerns really because of the proximity of the developments by the village school. And I just wonder if is there any more details on the traffic management plan so far? Because I know it's mentioned, but there's obviously concern and ongoing issues with the children being dropped off at school, the big vehicles going on there, development taking place across from the school. But also, although I welcome the developers' contribution of 16,675 towards the infrastructure and changes to Lotts Road, will it actually alleviate any issues of any kind on there? Because there is sheer drops both sides. And are we looking into maybe saying the development vehicles have got to go down one route, or is it going to become one way? Have we got any more details on that?
Thank you, Chair. There are perhaps three things for me to mention, all to do with traffic safety. I mentioned before how the design of this scheme follows on many of the cues from the approved scheme. And one of those is that usually with a development, you have individual drives onto the road where vehicles can reverse out onto the front street. And both developments have been designed so that all the access is from the internal estate road. So that concentrates the access and the traffic without having lots of vehicles reversing out. Another point for me to mention is that in terms of the construction phase, there is a requirement in the planning conditions for what we call a construction management plan, and that controls the hours of deliveries and other significant traffic movements on, as I say, during the construction phase. And the objective, or one of the objectives of that, is to avoid construction traffic coinciding with peak muster points at the school. The third thing was about what the money is for, and the county council have a scheme, a traffic calming scheme, and it includes extending outwards the urban speed limit, and if you like, at the moment, the site is outside the built-up area. Once it's developed, it will be within the built-up area. And so the urban speed limit needs pushing out accordingly. And as part of that, there's also proposals to have additional traffic calming. I've not seen those details, but I'm told by the Highway Authority that there is such a scheme. And this developer, along with the developer for the approved scheme and any other developments in Askham, housing estate developments, will be required to contribute. Will it address the point that you raised, Councillor, about the steep sides? No. But if one was looking at a scheme that would address something like that, it would be a multi-million-pound scheme you'd be talking about, road widening, massive difference in levels between the road level and the adjacent ground level, couldn't be done within the existing highway boundaries. You'd have to be land acquired. So no, it wouldn't achieve any of that. But there's no such scheme on the table. And under planning, we can only require contributions to recognised schemes. And we have two recognised schemes, the traffic calming and the cycleway improvements. We don't have one, I'm afraid, for wholesale improvements to Lotts Road.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Anybody else? Bill?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Charles. I've got a couple of things I want to ask you myself, but regarding the schools and the safety, County Council at this present time are working on a programme for safer schools. You've probably seen it in the paper. I don't know if you've seen it. The Askham School will be one of the ones that will be looked at, but there is right across the board there are going to be looked at. So that is in the programme at the moment. So just to answer that one, it'll be getting looked at. Okay, thank you. On this, I want to ask, I'm looking at the highways, they asked all the questions and they're happy, they're satisfactory that they've all been addressed, so I think that's a good thing. Just a couple of things from a clarification, Charles. This one about the national health surgeries, this is a new one. Well, when did this all come in? Is this something we're going to see more and more of these things coming along? Thank you, Chair.
Chair, yeah, it is a new thing, and meetings are taking place with the NHS to see if we can take on board their requests. But the line that we're taking at the moment is that there isn't a sufficient evidence base to ask for those contributions at the moment.
No, it was on one a few weeks ago, wasn't it? Yeah, and I'd mentioned that it was a new thing. Right, can I have a mover? The recommendation is for granting. Is there a mover, please? Is there a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
Right, thank you. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Abstain? One abstention.
That's carried, Chair, with one abstention.
Enough like you. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to the next one, which is, I'm going to change my glasses so I can read. This is proposed housing site at Crompton Drive. So this has come back again to us, has it? Right, Charles, Charles, is it you taking us through this, please?
Well, Chair, you'll see from the agenda there's actually two applications for Crompton Drive, and not only do they relate to the same site, but they relate to the same issue, which is this footpath link. So, with the Chair's permission, I was going to cover both in my talk. Well, the original planning permission for this development, 11 units, required a footpath link to be provided between Crompton Drive and Abbey Road. And the second report, that's on page 81, includes the details of the link, and it shows a gravel path and a ladder style And what those details are based on is anyone going for a walk in the countryside, using a public right-of-way, gravel paths and stiles or ladder stiles are the sort of standard fixture, as it were. So it was based on a countryside-type walk standard. And we've consulted Cumbria County Council as the highway authority, and they formally objected to those details. And for reasons which include the fact that the ladder style and the site is actually raised up above the pavement, would have to be built within the highway, within the footway of Abbey Road. They don't want that structure on the adopted highway, and they won't allow it. So really, whatever happens to the application, it's really not going to happen. So the recommendation is that those details be refused. And I know I'm doing things the wrong way around here. That's the page 81 item, the second item. This is actually the applicant's second attempt to get the details of the link approved. And the first scheme was County Council adoption, DDA compliant scheme. And it didn't have any steps, it was tarmacked. Very convoluted as a route because it's on such a steep slope. It's on a hillside in effect. So as I say, it was quite a convoluted route. And that was proposed to be widened by 1.5 meters to allow vehicle access to two of the dwellings. And it involved knocking out a section of the retaining wall, which is an attractive limestone wall, removing some trees in order to create that access. And that scheme was refused planning permission. Highways weren't objecting at that time, so it was objected on amenity grounds, the loss of the trees, the loss of the wall. A tree preservation order was served very quickly to protect the trees. And that scheme went to appeal. And I include within the document on the first report, page 48, the appeal decision where the council's decision to refuse on amenity grounds was upheld. And the inspector talked about harm to the visual qualities of the area, the loss of trees and wall, and the impact on the field as well, on the green wedge. And taking those comments on board and thinking about how those, how relevant they are to a footpath link, which meets adoption standards. There's not a lot between the two schemes, really, between the impact of the footway, which is DDA compliant, and the refused scheme for the private drive access. So what the recommendation is on these two items, again in reverse order, on page 81, for the gravel path, the recommendation is that's refused. In terms of the first application, which is to remove the requirement for the footpath altogether, taking account of what's been said about the harm, I feel that probably the harm outweighs the benefits of the footpath link in this case. And so the recommendation on the first item on page 41 is that the requirement for the footpath link is dispensed with.
Right, thanks, Charles. I haven't put my mic on. Anybody got any questions for Charles? No? Pretty straightforward. This is the one that we did not want to put a great big hole in the limestone wall and cut down the trees on Abbey Road, so we've all been quite adamant and together on that issue. So one recommendation on page, oh God, blind as a bat, page 53 is that that we don't actually, we discharge the condition, is that right, Charles?
Sorry, Chair.
Discharge the condition.
The first item, page 53, that's the modification, Chair.
Right.
And what the recommendation is there is that the council agrees to modify the obligation,
Right.
so that we don't require the footpath.
Right, that's fine. Is there a mover and seconder for that recommendation, please? Bill?
I'll second that, Anne.
Okay, thank you. Is that agreed? All in favour, please show.
That's unanimously carried, Chair.
Right, so if we go on to the recommendation on the next one, which is further along, that is for refusal. Have I got a mover and a seconder for that?
Yes, happy to
I'll
second.
second it.
Are you seconding that?
Yeah.
Somebody seconding it?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All those in favour of the refusal, please show.
Again, that's unanimously refused, Chair.
Right, both of those applications, the recommendations have been approved. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to Andreas Avenue. This is only on because it's our chief exec. Charles, are you doing this one?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Just very, very brief. As Chair's mentioned, that house extensions are not generally speaking reported to Planning Committee. And the reason that the application is on the agenda is because the applicant is an employee of the council. The scheme has three main components. It involves remodelling a front porch, so it's a different design, but it's the same footprint. It involves adding a dormer to the rear of the property. And it also involves adding a balcony. And again, this will be at the back of the property. And it looks towards the sea, towards Bigger Bank. And it's that element, the balcony, which has been the most contentious. And
Excuse me, Chair. Chair, sorry to interrupt you, Charles. Have we got to declare an interest in this, with it being the chief exec? The applicant's the chief exec.
I wouldn't have thought so. It's up to you if you want to declare an interest. We all know him, so I think.
I'd be inclined to agree with you, Chair, that it won't be necessary for members to declare because we're all in the same boat.
Because we all know who she is.
Yeah.
And actually, if Charles and I hadn't said who she was, you probably wouldn't have even realised it was her. Thank you. Continue, Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I was mentioning about how it was the balcony. And balconies can be quite contentious because of overlooking. And we received an objection from the immediate neighbour who was concerned about that very point, about overlooking from the balcony. And what's happened since then is that the design has been revised. In fact, it's been revised twice. And the overlooking issue has now been designed out. And the occupiers of the neighbouring property have written in to remove their earlier objection. So I am satisfied now that the issues that were raised originally have now been addressed, and the scheme can now be recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Charles. Anybody got any questions on this one? No, is that seconded? Yeah, seconded. Right, the recommendation for approval has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimously granted, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Right, so we move on to the next one, which is Marsh Lane, Askham. This is 2 garages to house a car in each garage and household storage. Right, Charles, do you want to do this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I need to start off by just explaining that the description is the description as it was when the scheme was first proposed, which was basically a double garage. And you perhaps see from reading the report and seeing the conditions that the scheme has evolved since it was first applied for. And the size of the building is now less, the height of it is considerably reduced. And also, there was concern about its location on quite a narrow lane. It's a private, it's not an adopted street, it's an unmade lane, which is quite narrow. It's only about one vehicle width. So we had concerns about the appropriateness of a double garage in terms of the extra traffic it might generate on this very narrow lane. So the scheme now has not only been made smaller, but it's been redesigned so that it can't actually accommodate cars anymore. So that's the point I needed to clarify, that the description is wrong. So basically the application is for, you can call them garages, I guess, but they are there, like most garages are used these days. Like, I'm not sure how many garages are actually used for parking, but they're there basically for household storage. And as I say, they're designed in such a way that they can't physically accommodate a car, and there's a planning condition attached to make sure that that applies in the future. So based on that revised design, the recommendation is for approval.
That's fascinating, that, isn't it? How can we give approval for garages that are not going to put a car in? Seems really weird to me. Charles, can they do that?
Yeah, well, Chair, I think if you went if I went and showed you 100 garages, I think I'd be lucky if we found 1 or 2 cars parked inside. And, you know, I just don't think garages tend to be used for parking these days, unless you're a classic car owner, perhaps. So as I say, in this case, the applicant would still would like the development, even though we've said it can't be used by vehicles, and is willing to you know, the application is to have them basically somewhere to keep the bicycle and the lawnmower, which, as I say, to be fair, I think is how most people use garages these days.
Well, I do, but then again, I don't drive, so I haven't got a car. Right, well, the recommendation is for granting. Have I got a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll second it, Anne.
All those in favour, please show.
Unanimously approved, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. That's the end of the planning application. So now we go on to the very end of the agenda, where we do the appointment of representatives to working groups. And the only working group we have is planning panel, which hasn't met, which we have been doing quite successfully on Zoom, by email. Ours will remain the same, myself, Colin, and Anita. So are yours remaining the same? Yeah. No, okay. Right. So they remain the same, Paula. So that is the end of the agenda and the end of the meeting. Thank you, Rachel. Can you turn us off?